will be held later tonight. Hello, I'm Matthew Amroliwala and welcome to Verified Live. 3 hours of breaking stories and checking out the truth behind them. Well, let's start in Ukraine as we try to verify exactly what happened with the destruction of that major dam in southern Ukraine. Scientists have found evidence that there was a large explosion in the area of the Kakhovka Dam close to the time when the dam was actually breached. Well, a seismology team from Norway found evidence of a blast by looking at seismic signals detected in Romania. In a separate development, Ukrainian security services have released a recording of what they say are two Russian military figures discussing how the dam was sabotaged, although those recordings can't be verified. Well, Ukraine has reported heavy fighting in the eastern region of Donetsk on Friday, and Ukrainian officials say forces have gained more ground in the city of Bakhmut. There are also reports of heavy fighting in the Zaporizhia region. Military experts say the area will be the focus of Ukraine's long-awaited counter-offensive. Well, let's go straight to our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams, who's in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. And Paul, just assess for us the significance of what these seismologists have been saying.
Well, I think it lays to rest any suggestion that what happened at the dam in the early hours of Tuesday morning was somehow an accidental collapse of the dam. What they detected at 2:54 in the morning was a huge seismic event, somewhere between magnitude 1 and 2, the kind of thing that could only have been created by a vast explosion, not regular military business, not artillery barrages, but a huge explosion. They also have clarified that in the half an hour or so before that, they heard other smaller explosions, and all of that tallies with some of the reporting that was coming out at the time, on the day, people who could hear that something was going on at the dam and then also began to hear water rushing through. We're beginning to get a picture of an event that lasted perhaps half an hour, in which the dam was gradually breached, and then the adjacent hydroelectric plant was simply blown to smithereens.
And Paul, in terms of what has followed, and we're looking at the floodwaters as you're speaking to us, there's the massive humanitarian operation. What are officials saying about the impact that has had on the counter-offensive we know, which is in its early stages?
Well, officials aren't saying anything about the connection between events at the dam and the counter-offensive. I think probably Ukrainian military planners were looking at that stretch of river from Kakhovka down to Kherson. We know, for example, that in late April there was a small operation across to the town of Oleshki, across the river in Russian-held territory. There was a little bridgehead there for a while. So the Russians were aware of this. They were aware that that was one possible avenue of attack for Ukrainian forces. And that perhaps helps to explain why the dam was blown up. But in the meantime, the attention is focusing further to the east, in the area where, frankly, almost everybody expects the main Ukrainian attack to come. And we have seen over the course of the last few days that attack beginning to gain momentum. It's involving some of the key bits of Western armoured equipment, fighting vehicles and Leopard tanks, which of course Ukraine was desperately looking for as it tried to get try to prepare for this moment. We're beginning to see that unfold. It's very early days. The Ukrainians, I think, have high ambitions for what it might achieve, but this is a counter-offensive that's probably going to last for 4 or 5 months.
Paul Adams live for us there in Kyiv. Thanks very much. Let's continue with this. Let's head to Odesa. Let's speak to the Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council, Bociurkiw, who's waiting there ready to join the programme. And thanks so much for your time. You were saying to our producer, if we didn't know this already about this war in Ukraine, it has massive global implications. And this breach of the dam simply underlines exactly that.
Absolutely, and what a red line has been crossed. If Western leaders haven't realized the magnitude of this red line, well, they should. Matthew, what we're looking at is a very widespread impact from this explosion. Number one would be food prices are going to spike once again because grain exports, a lot of other prime agricultural land won't be moving. Secondly, we're already feeling it here in Odesa, a crush of migrants from east of here. I suspect a good number of them will be heading towards other countries. And then thirdly, the ecological damage. We're already seeing reports from Odesa Oblast of debris of even animals and dead animals washing up on the shores. There are a lot of states, other states neighboring the Black Sea, they're going to be feeling it as well. So the magnitude of this cannot be overestimated.
And Michael, I was just asking Paul this exact question. Is it possible to make some sort of early judgment about how much, having to deal with the massive humanitarian crisis and the logistics, how much that interferes, distracts with the counter-offensive?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of the organizations that were doing the regular stuff of, you know, helping people affected by the fighting and moving them out of harm's way are now being diverted to rescuing people and providing water and that sort of thing. And state resources, lots of state resources have had to be diverted to provide things like clean drinking water to rescue people. So this is clearly a distraction, if we can put it that way, probably an intentional one. I tend to agree with what Paul was reporting about, that this now more and more appears to have been a deliberate act by the Russian side.
Michael, Paul was saying, and we've known it right from the early part of this week, that the officials in Ukraine giving very little detail about this counter-offensive for all the obvious reasons. But what do you think are the next stages, what we've seen so far, and what you think is likely to come both on the ground and even potentially in the air?
Yeah, well, I don't think we're going to be seeing a counteroffensive of likes like Iraq, shock and awe. It's going to be a lot of different points along the front line. Excuse me, I think a major thrust of the Ukrainians will be to sever that land bridge that connects Russia mainland with Crimea. That's going to be a #1 objective. I wouldn't be surprised if there was also another quote-unquote accident on the Kerch Bridge to really choke off Crimea. But the Ukrainians are also, as was reported, taking advantage of the new military kit that has come their way. My understanding is that Ukrainian pilots have been training in simulators of F-16s for quite some time. So as soon as those arrive from Poland or elsewhere, they'll be ready to hop in. And then finally, I think that the Ukrainians are going to be taking advantage of the disorganization on the Russian side. The chief of the Wagner group has just reportedly pleaded for 200,000 more Russian troops. Where they're going to find them without a general mobilization, I don't know. But things are not looking good for the Russians at all.
Michael Bociurkiw, thank you so much for joining us live there from Odesa. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.